but The Road to El Dorado is a very fun movie that has a lot of heart. That's pretty much everything to say.
Hey Cameron, are you in there? Cameron?
Alright, let's get back into this thing. What were you expecting? For me to throw the script over my shoulder? Because that would be kind of a stupid move considering that I built up a lot of hype for this video and people were anticipating it, I assume. Unlike a certain director, I would never do anything so brain-rotting for a cheap comedic moment. Because I love you all. Number 17, Captain Underpants, the first epic movie. Melvin is a stuck-up loser that no one liked in school, and if you relate to him because you were that kid in school, then we cannot be friends. Can you tell I had to deal with people like this before and how I feel about them? Personal feelings towards childhood memories aside, I never grew up reading the Captain Underpants books. I can't remember if my mom thought they were stupid and didn't want me reading them, or if it was because I thought they didn't have enough animals and dinosaurs on the cover, so I didn't care. The first comic I ever read was Mouse, which is a, It's a comic book, alright. It's actually really good if you can handle it. So I have no prior attachment to the books, but from what I've seen and from what people who have, it's a pretty faithful adaptation, which is a really excellent for fans. Because on top of that, it's also a really good movie that is way more emotional than it has any right to be. George and Harold's relationship may seem exaggerated, except I think for a lot of kids at this age, myself included, even if you had friends live next to you or in your neighborhood, but you get placed into separate classes, it really does hinder a friendship. Even though it's exaggerated, it's something that a lot of people can still relate with. Their friendship is the emotional core of this movie, and their friendship is so believable and heartwarming, not to mention funny. This is one of the few times where juvenile humor actually works, because that's what George and Harold bond over, making it part of that said emotional core, and not to mention it's still funny. Okay, it's not the smartest example of the jokes, but they are two boys in elementary school. Of course they find it hilarious. I like that we do get to see them even grow as characters, with the realization of Mr. Krupp always seeing him as this evil principal out to get them, when in fact he's just a sad, lonely, and grumpy grown man, and even doing something nice to help him at the end of the film. The animation is also this beautiful and expressive comic style animation that matches the vibes of the comic books. Plus, come on, it's got a song by Weird Al Yankovic. It's a heartfelt movie that reminds us of the much simpler days when we could just have fun and make jokes with our friends.
I really thought breaking that ring would get rid of his powers!
Yeah, well, here we go again! Tra-la-la!
Number 16, Chicken Run.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You've been a wonderful audience.
Okay, I'm gonna address the elephant in the room. Yes, this film does do the lie reveal trope, and while I still don't love it because it still does the big sad moping part, it does make sure that it doesn't just have the characters wait to get back together to fix everything. Instead, the hens look for a new solution instead of waiting and being sad, and that alternative idea is what actually gets them out of the chicken coop. The frustration of the trope is that characters act like nothing can be done in terms of progressing the story, unlike this where yes, they are hurt, but they try to and successfully find alternative solutions instead of feeling sorry for themselves. So now that I'm done with my TED Talk, the actual movie has so much going for it. For starters, like most Aardman movies, it's incredibly funny, with each character getting some solid lines, but I think Fetcher and Nick have the best ones, although the wildly immature part of me does find Rocky's remarks way funnier than I should.
That's what I'm doing.
Isn't there usually some flapping involved?
Hey, do I tell you how to lay eggs? Relax. We're making progress.
Drunken, anti-Semitic, and racist ranting incidents aside, Mel Gibson has some serious comedic delivery. Despite being very funny, this is a very well done movie about hope and overcoming insurmountable circumstances, and handles topics like depression and suicide very tastefully, with the axe scene being very haunting in particular and a great way to show us how many of the chickens have given up on hope. I didn't mention it earlier, but Aardman does an incredible job at character designs because all of their characters are so iconic, especially with their signature style. Just thought it should be acknowledged. Chicken Run is among one of their best films, however, I think there is one that is slightly better.
Yeah, but you have to have an egg to have a chicken.
Yeah, but you gotta get the chicken first to get the egg, and then the egg, get the chicken out.
Hang on, let's go over this again.
Number 15, Flushed Away.
Wait for it, wait for it.
Come and have a go if you think you're fast enough.
Yeah, I actually really like this one, and the only reason why the other movies later are higher than this one is because they all have strong emotional moments that really resonate with me personally. So for a movie about rats in a sewer ranking this high is a pretty impressive achievement. It's hard to say without getting repetitive of, it's a fun movie, but it is a very good adventure movie with a really creative world and somehow made the sewers of all places an interesting environment and made it seem so vast and diverse. A god sewer of all things. Rodney and Rita also have a really good dynamic. While there is a bit of that romantic undertones, I think it's more of a familial / partner dynamic, which is what Rodney ultimately needs and gets at the end of the movie. The Toad, Le Frog, Spike, and Whitey are all incredibly funny villains.
Keep your legs straight when you hit the water!
I kept my legs straight, Spike.
Oh. Ow!
I could honestly say this for the majority of these movies, but the voice acting in this one is top notch and makes some already hilarious lines even funnier. This also has the second best soundtrack of all the DreamWorks movies, with my particular favorites being Dancing by Myself, Are You Gonna Be My Girl, Bohemian Like You, and Proud Mary.
Where are we going?
I have no idea, but we're gonna get there really fast.
I'm coming, Mr. Jones. I'm coming.
Now we're moving on to the heavy hitters of DreamWorks. These are the movies which I could honestly see any of them being top dog, but let's be honest, I rank them for a reason. But I can't see why any of these could be someone's favorite DreamWorks movie. And so, let's dive right in. Number 14, Shrek.
True love and true love's first kiss. Yeah. Like that's ever gonna happen. What a load
Shrek is probably the most iconic DreamWorks movie and definitely one of the most famous anime movies of all time. It came in and reimagined what animated movies were thought they could be at the time. The comedy? Iconic. You know all the lines. Music? Iconic. You know all the songs. The characters? Iconic. They are incredibly relatable with Shrek's journey about finding people who love him despite everyone telling him that he's a monster. Just chef's kiss.
Hey, what's your problem, Shrek? What you got against the whole world anyway, huh?
Look, I'm not the one with the problem, okay? It's the world that seems to have a problem with me. People take one look at me and go, ah, help, run! A big, stupid, ugly ogre. They judge me before they even know me. That's why I'm better off alone.
You know what? When we met, I didn't think you was just a big, stupid, ugly ogre.
Yeah, I know.
His struggles with self-esteem are something that everyone can relate to at some point in their life, or even currently. The relationship between Shrek and Donkey is at their best here, at least in terms of friendship, and helps hammer the themes and messagings of the movie. Shrek has been talked about so much, it's hard to say too much because so much has already been said. You know why Shrek is beloved and why it's such a legendary animated movie. I think there are DreamWorks movies better than it, but that certainly doesn't take away from the cultural impact Shrek has had, because it's definitely deserving of it, and it paved the way for even bigger and better things, as hard as it is to imagine. Shrek is without a doubt an all-star.
I can't breathe.
Number 13, Shrek Forever After.
That's not the only thing you've outgrown.
Hey! I may have let myself go a little since retirement. Hanging up my soul was the best decision of my life. I have all the cream I can drink and all the mice I can chase. I'll get him later.
I was so happy when Shafrila's production did a video on this movie because this has always been my second favorite of the Shrek movies. Even as a dumb 9-year-old, I knew that Shrek Forever After was an underrated gem, so I'm glad the funny coconut crab man recognized it and brought it to the forefront. This movie is not the funniest Shrek movie, not because it's not funny, it just mostly focuses on the drama and the characters, which is something that I can appreciate if done right. Yeah, they do it right. Seeing Shrek come to realize what he had in this twisted version of It's a Beautiful Life is really emotional, with the highlight being Shrek finding his daughter's doll.
You know what the best part of today was? I got the chance to fall in love with you all over again.
You crying?
No! I'm not crying! Be more polite!
Rumpelstiltskin is also such a fun and slimy villain, and honestly, I like him more than Lord Farquaad, who was never all that for me. So why this one over the first Shrek, you may ask? Well, I think the biggest is I really like Shrek's character journey in this one, and I think I only like it as much because the first two are as great as they are. They helped Shrek Forever After get to where it is. That's not to say it can't stand on its own merits, because that would be disrespectful to everyone working on it, but it's the culmination of the journey of Shrek. It's basically Endgame, if it was done well. Shrek Forever After is a very good movie, and really does deserve more love and attention. Obviously, it's not the best Shrek movie, but I think we all knew it never would, but that doesn't mean that it's any less deserving of more attention in this high of a ranking.
You know, I always thought that I rescued you from the Dragon's Keep.
You did?
No. It was you that rescued me.
Number 12, Kung Fu Panda 3. Ah yes, what was previously known as the weakest entry in the Kung Fu Panda trilogy until 4 came along and proudly took that title. 4 did make me look back on this movie and think,
Perhaps I treated you too harshly.
You know, with the benefit of hindsight.
Not that I ever thought Kung Fu Panda 3 was ever bad. In fact, I've always thought it was a very good film, just not quite great. Granted, that's pretty hard when you're going against these two. However, this rewatch does make me realize that I may have overlooked some excellent elements. But before that, probably my controversial take on this film that I'm sure won't piss anyone off. Kai is overhyped. Wait, hear me out! Kai is incredibly badass and has such a sick and cool design. His jade swords give off serious Kratos energy in the best way, and this theme is perfect. Not to mention J.K. Simmons is as good as we come to expect from him in this role. He is still a solid villain because he is very intimidating. In the depth department, he's a bit lacking. At his core, he is mostly just another I want more power type of villain. I've seen a lot of people try to hype him up as this tragic character that was portrayed by Oogway when he decided to start taking chi from others, and yes, there are lines to hint to that, but they are so brief, and I might add that we are never given a reason on why he started stealing chi. I'd say the fact that he is a conqueror is part of that, but to try and say that his main motivation is other than to get more power seems a bit of a stretch. So much of his dialogue has to do with stealing chi. He does have lines saying he wants revenge on Oogway, but maybe this is just a me thing, but I never felt like that was what was driving him as a character. It's an element of him for sure, but at the end of the day, his goal is just to take over China, destroying Oogway's legacy. It's just something necessary in order to achieve that. And let me say Kai is not the worst villain. I would call him very solid, which for me is in between good and okay. It's just I see people saying as an individual character he's right at that same level as Shen and Tai Lung, who are so well written and excellent characters. Kai isn't that, but I understand why people love him and I still really enjoy him. I also feel like in this one the comedy wasn't bad, but I never had any moments where I was getting some hard belly laughs, unlike I get with the first two. That's pretty much any negatives I have. Even then, these are more so comparative negatives, but there is so much good stuff in this movie. Kung Fu Panda 3 has all the staples we have come to expect from the Kung Fu Panda movies. Beautiful animation, with this one being the most beautiful one, with the creativity and action scenes being spectacular. Po is as lovable and goofy as always, and the journey he goes through feels like a natural progression of his journey, at least in terms of themes. I don't necessarily agree with him trying to teach the Furious 5, but him teaching others definitely works. But the way that teaching for Po isn't about teaching, but trying to become more than just what he already is, and how he does this by pushing himself into new experiences, which just like in real life will probably result in a lot of failure, but it's how we let that failure from trying new things discourage us, or if we decide to push through it. Another aspect of the theme that I like is that even when Po is trying this new thing, he realizes he needs to do it his way, which I think is something that gets way overlooked in modern society with most things. Which limit individuals by forcing them to only do things one way when they can do things their way. Obviously, some things have to be taught a certain way, but for the most part, I feel like schools in particular could change to better fit individualized needs. But that's my soapbox speech about the American public school system. The introduction of Po's father was something hinted at in Kung Fu Panda 2 and handled very well. Even though he does lie to Po, you understand why he would, considering he thought his son was dead and his wife was killed when Shen attacked their village. The emotional highlights both involve Li Shang, with one being with Po talking about his wife.
She was the total package. Smart, beautiful, tremendous appetite. She was the love of my life. And then, just when I thought I couldn't get any luckier, along you came, my little lotus. I really had it all. Until that one moment.
Dad, you don't have to worry about losing me ever again. Okay?
In his conversation with Mr. Ping on fatherhood, who at this point had been suspicious of Li, fearing Po would be taken away from him, he realizes that he is having a selfish fear, and that Li being back in Po's life is a great thing for Po.
I didn't really come along because I was worried Po would go hungry. I was worried about you.
Worried that I go hungry?
No. I was worried you'd steal Po from me. But I realize having you in Po's life doesn't mean less for me. It means more for Po. Look, he's hurt. He's confused. and he still has to save the world. He needs both his dads.
Kung Fu Panda 3, while maybe the second weakest of the quadrilogy, was still a great conclusion to the series. Until number 4 came out, but hey, I already talked about that one. Number 11, Rise of the Guardians.
Hey, Bunny, check out this view. Oh, you do care.
Rack off, you bloody show pony.
It's impressive how the bad guys can be a thing, and this is the DreamWorks movie that has the most attention on Tumblr. I guess it checks out. You got the lonely, edgy goofball hottie that quite literally isn't seen by others and just wants to be seen and comforted. Of course, this was going to breed an explosion of fan fictions and other types of material, many of which are extremely graphic, I might add. Jokes aside, I was extremely shocked by this movie and how much better it was than I remembered. I definitely knew it was going to be in that positive half of the ranking, but I didn't think it would be this close to the top 10. So what does this movie do to get it this high? Well, for starters, it has the best Santa ever. Yeah, I said it. Better than Tim Allen, better than Ed Asner, better than Stan Francine, and better than Richard Attenborough. At me at that. Whoever came up with the idea of making Santa Claus a Russian kick warrior deserves a raise. But they don't make it so much that it's not even Santa, because he still acts how we would expect a Santa to act. Jolly, creative, caring, and best of all, full of wonder. This movie has about the maximum amount of whimsy in a movie that I can handle before it gets all sappy and cheesy, but it works because that's kind of the point of the movie. The other core message being what's at your center. Every person cannot be defined to just one core trait. We are layered, but no matter what else we may have, we have our center, which is what defines us. The role of the Guardians is to protect and inspire hope into the children of the world. It's such an uplifting and positive message that I think we need more than ever in a world full of pessimism. Granted, I am part of this and certainly trying to be better about this. Hey, I did 3 positive videos in a row. I'm surprised I don't have rainbows and cotton candy shooting out of my... The tooth collecting scene is extremely funny and I still die watching it every single time.
Whoa, whoa, whoa! Take it easy there, champ. He's one of us. Part of the European division. Ça va?
Pitch Black is also a fun villain. He has a similar backstory as Jack Frost, but he uses it as an excuse to spread terror and darkness because that's the only way he could be noticed. Not to mention he has a sick design with some super creative powers. I will say there are 2 things I don't like. The first being the elves are clearly just minion ripoffs, but luckily they don't have nearly as much screen time as the trailers made it look. The second on being the very last minute ex machina complete revival of a character from literal nowhere in terms of story, and no explanation is offered. Not even a half one. Like, oh, the children started believing, so he was able to come back. This section is a bit shorter because I honestly would like to give Rise of the Guardians its own video someday so I could do a more detailed analysis because it absolutely deserves it.
My name is Jack Frost, and I'm a Guardian. How do I know that? Because the moon told me so. So when the moon tells you something, believe it.
We have now made it to the top 10 movies. These are the creme de la creme DreamWorks films. So let me cease this yapping so I can do some yapping about said top 10. Number 10, Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron. So Spirit is the only movie on this list at the moment to get a full in-depth analysis video on it, so I'll be brief on repeating some of the points because that video pretty much covers everything I wanted to talk about. But in short, Spirit is an incredible visual story that uses almost no dialogue, at least none from the animals, which for an animated movie directed at kids is a ballsy move considering kids usually aren't into that. But it does it so wonderfully in one of those DreamWorks films that has gotten more attention because of how special it was, at least coming from an American studio. studio. Because you know us Americans like things big and loud and stupid. I will say I was saving it for this movie, but I did want to compare two similar scenes from this movie and Spirit Untamed, my least favorite DreamWorks movie, because if there's one way for a studio to guarantee that I hate a movie, it's to make a better version of something I love.
Why would we show a scene that, smoothly and naturally shows the amount of time it took Spirit in the original movie to trust people, when she can do it in like 3 days? Clearly Little Creek had no idea what he was doing. A 10-year-old girl is clearly the expert when it comes to gaining the trust of a wild animal. It might have been longer, but the film did such a terrible job of communicating it to the audience that it comes across as 3 days. So as far as I'm concerned, it was 3 days.
Yeah, in this movie it's clearly shown that Spirit takes months before he trusts Little Creek. Even then, when he knows Little Creek is a good person and even protects him during the village raid, he still doesn't let him get on his back until the final chase scene, which makes it so much more impactful because their friendship feels real and this moment is earned. The goodbye is also so much more emotional because of it. When you take the time to properly set up emotional payoffs and don't rush them, it makes them so much better. Rushing something, especially when you are basically just copying something already done, just makes the rush product even lazier. When little girl, whose name I don't remember and don't care enough to look up, a friend's spirit, it's at most in the span of a week, if I'm being generous. And then it's the most basic childish interpretation of gaining a wild animal's trust, especially one that is still having negative experiences with other people. How is it that a movie that came out in 2002 is so much better than this supposedly newer version? In theory, the newer version had all this time to think of ways to improve or look at what made the original so good. So you think it would be just as good, if not better. God, thinking of this movie makes me realize how terrible Untamed is, and I feel more justified in putting it in last place and this one in the top 10. But I do recommend checking out my separate video on this movie, as I talked about how special that movie is to me because I have such a love for this movie, and that isn't going away anytime soon. Number 9, How to Train Your Dragon 2.
Come on, Toothless. Show them what you got, bud.
How to Train Your Dragon 2 is a great movie despite me thinking it's the weakest in the trilogy, which is pretty impressive. That being said, I think there are some issues holding it back, with the biggest one being Drago. In theory, I think there is a good idea with him being a straight up bad dude, and there are in fact bad people who aren't interested in being redeemed. But that's in theory. In practice, he is a take over the world type of villain that screams at the dragons. He's a fine enough threat, but that's about it. Toothless also feels very underutilized as well. In the first and third movie, he is definitely his own character. Here, I feel like he's more of a typical movie dog. Does cute things for sure, but feels like they don't really have anything meaningful for him to do until Drago gets a hold of him. Grievances have been said, now compliments will be handed out like a TikTok star giving PS5s to a group of starving children. That doesn't even make any sense, just skip to animation. Incredible. The flying scenes are all as great as the first film, and the action is wonderfully choreographed and executed. The character designs are also all appropriately aged, and thankfully only enhance the character designs. The dragon designs are also all very creatively, each design perfectly fitting the roles each dragon fills. The soundtrack, still great. John Powell continues to do an excellent job as always. The progression of Hiccup's character is also very well done. We get to see him beginning to grow into this role of a leader, as well as see him fail when he tries to have peace and how that backfires. Talking about Hiccup's failures to find peace, let's talk about Stoic and his death and how some have criticized it with it not being earned or as impactful as it could have been. And while I can see where some come from on this, I don't necessarily agree. For those of you who don't know, there are two tie-in canon series, with one being Riders of Berk and the others being Race to the Edge, both of which take place during the first film and this one. And these two series are great. The animation is of a TV budget, but the show continued to do a great job of fleshing out the characters. Heck, all the side friends that are really annoying in the movies are actually likable in the series. But a notable part of each series is Hiccup's relationship with his father. Both shows show us the growing development of their relationship with one another, and how even though they make progress, there is still that barrier between them that each struggles to overcome but still makes an effort to. If you have watched the shows, then Stoic's change in behavior makes perfect sense and makes his death that much more heart-wrenching. Whereas if you haven't watched it, it is a seemingly sudden change and can feel a bit jarring, and the relationship in 2 doesn't seem as strong to make Stoic's death and funeral as impactful as it should be. And I don't think you should have to watch 8 seasons of television to understand a movie. But I did, and this is my ranking, hence why it's placed so high. Or why it's not an issue for me, but something that enhances the movie. How to Train Train Your Dragon 2 is a great sequel that does something any good sequel should do. It grew and evolved the story in new and interesting ways while still keeping the elements from its first predecessor that made it so successful in the first place.
Oh, sure, they have armies, and they have armadas, but we have our dragons!
Number 8. How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World. This is one of the few movies that can almost make me cry for a lot of different reasons, both in the movie and just in my own personal life. With one being the recent passing of my little doggo Lola, who my family and I often dubbed our little Night Fury. So obviously Hiccup saying goodbye to Toothless hits even harder, and I didn't make it any easier for myself when I decided to make the brilliant decision to use a track and quote from this movie for her little tribute. May you have all the fields to run around in, Lola. But that's why I love this movie so much. Even though it is about saying goodbye to loved ones and how it hurts, it's the fact that we got to have them in our lives in the first place that allowed us to form these relationships that will eventually end in some way or another, but in the end it's all worth it. That ending is so bittersweet but perfect, and I wouldn't change a thing about it. Hiccup continues to grow into his role as a leader, and his struggle and eventual realization that he has to say goodbye to Toothless in order to protect him helps add to the themes of love and loss. Toothless is at his best, with definitely the most character work for him happening, with him having a struggle with the choice of his best friend or his love and ruling over all the other dragons in the hidden world where he should be. The main villain Grimmel is also a pretty good villain, being a sort of darker what-if version of Hiccup and being cold and calculating, always one step ahead. A definitive improvement over Drago. However, if you have watched the series, then you'll know him as a Diet Vigo, who is the best villain this franchise has produced, although Dagger is a pretty fun villain. Some criticisms I do have is that the side gang is at their most annoying here and have way too much screen time. I also feel like the Light Fury could have also had a bit more personality. The comedy is also definitely the most mixed of the trilogy. All that aside, because even though those are negatives, I think the positives far outweigh any negatives, because this is about as perfect a conclusion as you could ask for such a beloved trilogy.
But we Burkians, we know otherwise. And we'll guard the secret until the time comes when dragons can return in peace.
Number 7. Kung Fu Panda.
You are free to eat.
Am I?
Are you?
When I first heard that this movie was coming out as a kid, I was fairly excited because I was a dumb little 7-year-old. It looked like a silly movie with goofy jokes. To be fair, I'm sure a lot of people around my age thought similar things, but looking back now and watching the trailers, it's such a shock that not only did this goofy animated movie about a big fat panda doing kung fu completely subvert everyone's expectations and turning out to be a great movie, but easily one of DreamWorks' best and one of the best animated films, period. Po is one of the most likable and relatable protagonists in animated history. He is constantly told about his limitations and flaws, enforcing this idea that he will only ever be this version of himself that he doesn't like. Even when he is chosen to be the Dragon Warrior, something that is this dream come true to him, he's still bullied by Shifu and the Furious Five.
You knew I was trying to get rid of you, yet you stayed.
Yeah, I stayed. I stayed because every time you threw a brick at my head or said I smelled, it hurt. But it could never hurt more than it did every day of my life just being me.
That is such a frighteningly real line that it's actually terrifying. And this is coming from an animated comedy about a panda. Even when Po comes to the realization that the Dragon Scroll is blank and what his dad tells him goes against what he previously thought about himself.
The secret ingredient is nothing.
Huh?
You heard me. Nothing.
You don't add some kind of special sauce or something?
Don't have to. To make something special, you just have to believe it's special.
There is no secret ingredient.
He was always trying to change who he was when he realized that he is the special ingredient. Contrast it against Tai Lung, who is such an imposing threat that steals every scene he is in. Seeing how dedicated he was to becoming the Dragon Warrior because that destiny of his was forced upon him by Shifu, and then when it turned out he was not meant to be the Dragon Warrior and not supported by Shifu, it shows how he couldn't do what Po could, except what he is. In this case, he was not meant to be the Dragon Warrior. He is still sympathetic to a degree, but I think some people get a little too lenient or try to downplay his actions because of Shifu's treatment and abandonment of him.
You knew I was the Dragon Warrior. You always knew. But when Oogway said otherwise, what did you do? What did you do? Nothing. You were not meant to be the Dragon Warrior. That was not my fault. Not your fault? Who filled my head with dreams? Huh? Who drove me to train until my bones cracked? Who denied me my destiny?
If he just wanted Shifu, I'd say yes, but he's willing to hurt innocents and go on destructive rampages, not to mention the murder. Lots and lots of murder. I think it's safe that Oogway is one of the most popular comfort characters of the more recent generations, with some of the most iconic lines of the franchise coming from him.
You are too concerned with what was and what will be. There's a saying, yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift. That is why it is called the present.
Not to mention having one of the saddest deaths accompanied by one of the most beautiful movie scores I've ever heard. I know I'm stating the obvious, but this soundtrack is truly something special, with Hans Zimmer and John Puel hitting the ball out of the atmosphere. The fight choreography is very well done, resulting in both thrilling, dramatic, or comedic fight scenes, or in some cases all three. This is a masterpiece and has gained so much attention and praise that all you need to say about this movie is that it's Kung Fu Panda, and everyone automatically knows what you're talking about. If that doesn't speak to a film's quality, then I don't know what does. What else can I say other than it's Kung Fu Panda?
You want to get something to eat?
Yeah.
Number 6, Megamind. Megamind is an absolute masterpiece, and I fully agree with every video essay about how the subversion of characters is masterfully done, how Titan represents incels has aged like a bottle of fine wine, how Megamind's journey is great, how Metro Man's monologue is great, how Roxanne's journey is great. Basically, I fully agree that Megamind deserves all the love and that all the elements are pretty much darn near perfect. I will say that as I gotten older, one thing that has changed about this movie is my perception of Metro Man's choice. As a child, I always saw his choice to not help, at least when Titan is on a rampage, as incredibly selfish, because if you are in a position where you can help someone, you should. I do hold that belief to a certain extent, but that's not the point with Metro Man and his decision. He never had the choice to be anything other than selfless. When he realizes this, he even tries to push Megamind to the same conclusion, that he doesn't have to be what society has labeled him as, that he doesn't have to be the bad guy. He can choose who he wants to be, just like how Titan chose to become a villain. On top of that, this movie is really funny.
Yeah, I'm like your space dad.
And you are what?
I'm your space stepmom. I've had some work done recently.
Here, old friend. In case you haven't noticed, you've fallen right into my trap.
You can't trap justice. It's an idea, a belief.
Even the most heartfelt belief can be corroded over time.
Justice is a non-corrosive metal.
But metals can be melted by the heat of revenge.
It's revenge, and it's best served cold.
But it can be easily reheated in the microwave of evil.
Well, I think your warranty is about to expire.
Maybe I got an extended warranty.
Warranties are invalid if you don't use the product for its intended purpose.
Oh, girls, you're both pretty. Can I go home now?
Now it's time for some witty back and forth banter. You go first. Okay, look, I'm not sure where to go with that.
And Megamind, this was for Space Stepmom! You lied to her!
There are certainly a couple of contenders for funniest movie on this list, and Megamind is certainly in the running for it. The action is also very creative, with a lot of emphasis on spectacle that pays off, resulting in the best superhero entrance ever. And I mean in any superhero movie ever. You name me a better superhero entrance and I'll show you a funny Amy Schumer special. Megamind really is the real deal. And you want to know the difference between this movie and The Bad Guys, which is another movie that is about people forced into their villainous roles by society only to learn that they can be the good guys?
Yeah? What's the difference?
Presentation!
Number 5, The Prince of Egypt. Okay, before I get crucified for putting this at number 5, I'll go on the record that I could probably concede that this is probably the best DreamWorks film objectively, or at least one of the 3 in terms of pure artistry. I also did put it in the top 5 out of 46, which puts it in the top 10%. Prince of Egypt is a masterpiece of a film. The animation, cinematography, voice acting, music, the atmosphere, the characters, the story, all of it amazing. Although a significant chunk of that last one comes from the previous sources. Ramesses is without a doubt the best DreamWorks villain, and that's saying something because there is some stiff competition. Part of what makes him such a great villain is his relationship with Moses.
So, you have returned, only to free them.
They are brothers, which makes it even more heartbreaking when they have to fight against each other for Moses to free his people, because you know they both care about each other. But Ramesses has been essentially shamed and pressured into ruling Egypt as his father did, not wanting to be the weak link in the line of pharaohs. Moses is also an incredible protagonist that goes through, well, they do call it a Moses journey for a reason when referring to other characters' journeys in a movie. I think that really speaks volumes. The soundtrack is also magnificent, with each song being both what the story needs while still excellently crafted objectively. So how I've talked about this movie, many angry people are wondering why number 5. Well, for one, I did say this was my list, so my personal feelings and thoughts towards every animated DreamWorks movie is considered, which leads me to the next point. As great as The Prince of Egypt is, I can only relate to it so much. I can love the relationship between Ramses and Moses, but I can only relate to it so much as an individual watching a situation. Most of the time in modern times, people on the internet especially really try to hyper-focus on objective statements when looking at movies, and yes, objective criticism is absolutely needed and necessary. It often overlooks something very obvious about movies, and I'm absolutely guilty of doing this too, so this isn't a way to try to call specific people out, but movies are art, and art is meant to speak to us on a personal level. And each of our personal experiences, interests, dreams, successes, and failures shape how we take in art, and in my case, the top 4 movies remaining do that for me over Prince of Egypt. Who I am as a person defines who I am. I don't believe in hiding who you are or what you like. These are movies that I connect with on that level, and just like how you have that one movie that you can connect with because that's who you are, and that should never be shamed or discouraged. So with that, let's get down to the last 4 movies of this list. Number 4, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish.
I'm done running. Fear me if you dare.
Funny enough, the last DreamWorks video I did, I took a small portion of it to talk about Puss in Boots: The Last Wish and how amazing it is, and well, you can tell that it still ranks very high with me. This movie has been talked about at length on the internet and how amazing of a film it is, and obviously I agree. Duh. Anyone with normal working eyes could tell that the animation is incredibly beautiful and stylized with obvious influences like Spider-Verse, but still having its own unique spin on it. But I assume you all want to hear me say what I liked about the most popular part of this movie, or should I say character. And fine, I'll stop beating around the bush. But Mama Luna truly is one of the great— Nah, I'm just kidding, it's Death.
And I don't mean it metaphorically or rhetorically or poetically or theoretically or in any other fancy way. I'm Death. Straight up.
You know Death is terrifying when a grown man-child has the occasional nightmare of him, or wakes up when you're half asleep and the jacket on the wall looks exactly like Death and you just accept your time has come. Okay, minus the accepting death part because I'm going down swinging, even though that climax would be shorter than, well. But yes, I have nightmares where Death from this movie is coming after me. It's not often, but the fact that it's happened at all I think is the best way I could describe how effective he is and why Puss's anxiety anxiety attacks are so real. And his fear of death coming for him is something very real and that everyone has experienced at least at some point in their life. I also love the story of realizing what matters in life, but also fighting for this life since it's the only one we get. Not too much I can say about this movie that hasn't already been said by people much smarter than me. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, I congratulate you on making it this far in the ranking. A truly impressive feat for such a relatively new movie.
Where are we headed anyways?
Off to find new adventures and to see some old friends.
Now, coming in third place for our bronze medal, we have Shrek 2.
Harold! Shrek!
Fiona!
Mom! Harold!
Donkey!
Wow, I'm so surprised. Who ever saw this coming? Shrek 2 is another internet darling, and also rightfully so.
Hey, who's this guy? Who let this guy in?
I just,
He's got a real funny face. I like your face, guy.
Thank you.
What a cute, funny face. You want a cookie? Can someone
okay.
get this guy a cookie?
Since I was a wee little lad, I watched this movie all the time, and I'm glad to say that it still holds up. Shrek 2 takes every element from the first Shrek and somehow improves upon it. I have said there are a lot of funny DreamWorks movies, but this one takes the cake. I quote this movie daily, and I have laughed some of the biggest, hardest gut laughs every time I've watched this movie.
Back the gossamer curtains to find her.
What? Princess
Fiona?
No!
Oh, thank heavens.
Police brutality! Police brutality!
Hey, look, a little cat.
Look out, Shrek! He got a piece!
What do you reckon we should do with him?
I say we take the sword and neuter him right here. Give him the Bob Barker treatment. Oh, madre, no, por favor. Please, I implore you.
You capitalist pizza!
Oh, get it off! Oh!
Catnip.
That's no mind.
Oh, you great stupid pastry! Come on!
I'm wearing ladies' underwear.
Are you?
I most certainly am not.
It looks like you most certainly am on.
I am not.
What kind?
It's a thong.
I can maybe count on one hand the number of jokes that didn't land with me, because every other joke is on the verge of suffocating me with a comedic plastic bag over my face. Oh yeah, and then there's that one scene that's, it's pretty iconic, I guess.
Hit it!
I'm not sure if I can find it, but I know my folks took some home videos of little 4-year-old Cameron dancing to the song, and hey, it's still my most listened to song of all time, 2 years in a row, because I'm basically as close as I can get to straight up injecting this song into my veins. But if you ever need a good workout song, you know what you need to do, but if you have the strength for something so awesome will depend on your resolve. I won't go into detailed number of times I think of this scene alone. It's a concerning amount, like go get tested to see if I have autism amount. Also, fairy godmother, MILF. And I will die on that hill, no matter what other people may argue. Not many people would deny Shrek 2 is an iconic movie, but some may argue Puss in Boots 2 is more deserving of this spot and flip Shrek 2 with this one. And to that I say, it was at one point. The flip-flopping between these two was excessive, but at the end of it, it came down to one thing, the main ideas of each movie. One is about cherishing this life we have because it is precious and we only have one of them. The other one is about finding out that you are in fact worthy of receiving love from others, even if you yourself don't necessarily feel that all the time about yourself. Without going into too much detail, because I'm not trying to paint a sob story for pity, but Shrek 2 was given spot 3 because of that and how it portrays Shrek's very insecurities, and fairy godmother, who is an excellent villain, preys on these to further her own agenda. It's very possible as I get older, Puss in Boots 2 might switch spots, and not to get grim, but it's not like I'm getting any younger here. But valuing this life has always been a pretty important value for me and something that I've never personally struggled with, so seeing that portrayed in the movie is great. But there's just something about seeing a character with the same insecurities or struggles that you have and seeing them overcome them. It gives you something very important. It can give you hope. When you can somehow make a great movie that becomes so culturally significant and successful, and then you do that again, but even better, you know you have a true masterpiece. And coming in at second place for our silver medal is Kung Fu Panda 2. Similar to Shrek 2, Kung Fu Panda looks at its predecessor and says, yeah, let's do that again, but even better. I think some high praise should be given to Jennifer Yu Nelson, the first woman and Asian American to direct a major animated film. Kung Fu Panda 2 does everything a good sequel should. It goes without saying that the animation was improved, and while I still think 3 has the best animation, this one has my favorite look, with the heavy tones of red permeating throughout the movie. The Kung Fu fights are as incredible and enjoyable as the first film, with the set pieces being even bigger. It's also nice to see Poe and the Furious Five as actual friends, and that while he is still himself, they do respect and care for him. It still has that signature goofy comedic sense of humor that endures us to the characters, even with a much darker tone. I mean, we introduced genocide to this universe within the first 5 minutes, with my personal favorite DreamWorks villain, Lord Shen, voiced by the talented Gary Oldman, who brings this charismatic and sadistic energy to the character. Lord Shen's design somehow made a peacock both menacing and bad, while still really scary, even though he still gets some funny lines without it seem forced or disrupting the flow of the scene.
Greetings, Panda. We meet at...
Hey, how you doing?
Hey. A little to the left.
Oh, but it's so heavy, Master.
30 years I've waited for this moment. Everything must be exactly how I envisioned it. And I envisioned it a little to the left. Perfect. With the weapon by my a little bit more.
He is much more of an emotional and mental threat towards Poe, which has been something that all except 4 have done with each villain, representing a different type of threat for Poe to overcome. Lord Shen is one of the most evil villains, committing genocide in order to avoid his destiny, but straight out of the first movie,
one often meets his destiny on the road he takes to avoid it.
He believes that he is destined to rule all of China, and that when his parents exiled him from the city that they hated him, when in fact doing so still broke their hearts. Even though he did this horrible thing, they still loved him, and it broke their hearts to see him go down this dark path.
So your parents can rest in peace.
My parents hated me. Do you understand? They wronged me. And I will make it right.
They loved you. They loved you so much that having to send you away killed them.
The dead exist in the past, and I must attend to the future.
Even with all this skill, wealth, and power, we see how Shen is still insecure about his fate. And even when preparing to meet Poe, we see him practicing because for as dangerous as he still is so set on his past that it ends up being his downfall, which he does eventually accept. Poe's journey in this film is the main reason why this movie is one of the few movies that I legit will cry when I watch. Yes, Kung Fu Panda 2 makes Cameron cry. There are a lot of great scenes in this movie, but I have to say the best one is when Poe finds the village he grew up in and discovers why his mom put him in that radish container.
It's enough to make a grown man cry. And that's okay. You go right ahead, T.
And this is the scene where I cry, and I continue to cry when the soothsayer says this to him.
Your story may not have such a happy beginning, but that doesn't make you who you are. It is the rest of your story, who you choose to be.
We get to choose who we want to be, and we decide if we want to hold on to the past, or we can let it go because it doesn't define us. Whether it be mistakes or even to a lesser extent trauma, I don't think we should forget these things because they happen, and to forget them is to forget what we can learn from them. But we can't let them hold us back from our future and who we are now. And that's what Poe realizes. Despite the traumatic beginning to his story, it's still going, and what he has now is what's important. He was finally able to find inner peace.
I know who I am.
You do?
I'm your son. I love you, Dad. I love you too, son.
And coming in as the #1 DreamWorks animated movie winning the gold medal of this arbitrary video is...
There are many lawyers. I could give you many books. There are books that are written on how the election was rigged.
Yes, dear viewer, this was a rigged competition from the start. Because not only is How to Train Your Dragon my favorite DreamWorks movie of all time, not only is it my favorite animated movie of all time, but it is my favorite movie of all time. My senior year, I wrote a 10-page essay on the editing for this film alone. That should show how much I love this movie. This was the only movie where I knew the exact placement for it. I did say this was my ranking, but in all fairness, I don't think people wouldn't see why this could be #1. I don't think review sites are that reliable, but to give an idea of what audiences and critics think with How to Train Your Dragon, it's number 15 on Rotten Tomatoes for the top 300 movies and number 200 on IMDb's top 250 list. These are two lists that I've considered every single movie ever made, and they still made it on. It's pretty easy to see why everyone loves this movie. The animation, especially the flight scenes, are some of the best use of 3D and best cinematography in a film. I personally think that the 3D here is better than in Avatar. Even when you're not watching it in 3D, you still feel like you're thousands of feet in the air. Part of what makes the flying scenes so incredible is just the music in general, which enhances every scene it's playing. John Poel's score is my favorite and one of the reasons he is among one of my favorite film composers in the industry. All the designs are iconic, both the human characters and of course the dragons. The story is a bunch of cliches, but done in a unique and interesting way. It's not the story you're telling, it's how you tell it, and How to Train Your Dragon does tell it in a refreshing way. What helps keep the story so refreshing are the characters, because they feel like real people despite being in this fantastical world. The banter and dialogue are full of wit and heart. Hiccup and Stoke's relationship especially feels real, with a parent not understanding their kid but still loves him even if he doesn't know how to show it. Even when Stoke rejects Hiccup, it visually affects him, just like any real person. You understand why characters act the way they do, and you're able to sympathize with where they are coming from even if you yourself don't necessarily agree with them. Honestly, there's so much about this movie that I love that I will be making a separate video for it. When will that happen? Who knows? I always imagine it as being one of the final videos of this channel, but I don't have any plans on that happening anytime soon. I believe that How to Train Your Dragon is objectively one of the best animated movies of all time, both in terms of writing and technical skills, which is why I decided to place How to Train Your Dragon as the #1 DreamWorks movie.
The only upsides are the pets. While other places have ponies or parrots, we have dragons.
And that brings us to the end of this video. Even though I did have to sit through a lot of mediocrity and garbage, I'm glad I did it because it made the great films that much better. When DreamWorks takes risks, just like anything in life, sometimes it pays off and sometimes it doesn't. But the risks are worth it because we get to see films like Megamind, Kung Fu Panda, and Shrek, even if we get a Shark Tale, Spirit Untamed, and Trolls to match them. Because at the end of the day, DreamWorks is always going to have failures and successes, but that doesn't change the fact that they have made some of the most influential animated films of all time, and I certainly wouldn't have my love for film and storytelling without them. DreamWorks is very special to me. I've talked about it before in the other video I did, but the characters of DreamWorks have always been the most iconic and greatest parts of these movies. Maybe they have a camera always watching people, but I don't think it's a coincidence that these characters are depicted having the same insecurities that we have. These creators are telling the stories and characters that are personal to them, and that's something that's really comforting. At the end of the day, this list doesn't really mean much to most people because it's my ranking that fits me based on my life and who I am. I'm sure your list would probably be quite different, and that's a good thing. Everyone's going to be different, and at the end of the day, that's the beautiful thing about movies. They are art that speak to us individually for different reasons, and impact us in ways we never thought possible. My name's Cameron. I hope you enjoyed this video. Spank all those buttons, stay safe out there, and I'll see you all later. Bye bye. Hey, you're still around? Well, thank you for making it to the end of this video. This was my longest scripted video to date, and something that I've been wanting to do for the better part of 2 years. So it has been quite a journey to get here, especially since I am a one-man team, but I do want to thank my friends that also helped me make this video possible, especially with the live action stuff. It really means a lot that you've watched to this point, so thank you, and I hope you had a great day and enjoyed the video.
Cameron?